Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the sources you provide, sometimes complex papers, other times, like today, something quite different, and we really dig in to give you the essential knowledge you're looking for.
That's right. We try to cut through the noise, give you the context, maybe those aha moments.
And today, we're tackling a story that's really shaped so much of the world, but often gets, well, complicated. We're looking at the story of Jesus.
hmm And critically, we're drawing entirely from a source that was designed specifically for clarity, for simplicity. It avoids a lot of the historical or institutional layers.
Yeah, this source, it presents the life, the teachings, the significance of Jesus very directly. It actually describes him as an important person who changed the world with his love. Simple as that.
And our job here is to respect that simplicity, but also unpack the profound ideas inside that simple narrative.
Hmm.
The source itself says it's meant to be easy for the heart to understand.
Which suggests the power isn't necessarily in complex theology, but maybe in its emotional clarity, its moral directness.
Exactly. We need to look at how this seemingly simple story, according to this source, builds such a potent message of love and hope. Why did it have such an impact?
That's the fascinating part, isn't it? The simple message versus the world-changing result. It implies the power is in the instruction itself.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to follow the narrative arc presented in our source, start with the core teachings, look at the example he set, then face the conflict and the idea of sacrifice, and finally dive into this extraordinary claim of hope that the story says changed everything.
Okay. So let's start right at the foundation. What was his central message, according to this source?
Well, looking at the source, it's impossible to miss. Everything seems to circle back to one core idea. Love.
Love. It's a word we hear all the time, isn't it?
Exactly.
Maybe it sounds a bit soft.
Right. But the source is very explicit. It says this principle sounds simple, but is actually very powerful.
And that's key, isn't it? Why powerful? Because, according to this telling, it wasn't just a nice feeling. It was structured. The source points to two specific commands that really anchor everything.
The two great commandments, yeah. First, love God. And second, the one that really impacts how people interact. Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
And the power, arguably, comes from linking those two. Think about the context back then. Often, religious focus was heavily on, following rules, specific rituals.
Right, being outwardly correct.
Exactly. But by putting love for God and love for people on, well, essentially the same level, mediated just by love, he was proposing something quite different, a new moral framework almost.
So it wasn't just a suggestion, it was like the bedrock.
According to the source, yes, the absolute foundation.
Okay, so loving God is that sort of vertical connection, but love your neighbor as yourself. That's the horizontal, the practical bit. How does the source say people should actually do that? It sounds like a pretty high bar.
It does, but the source breaks it down very simply. It says, treat people with kindness. Help them. Be a good friend.
Just be nice, care for others.
Pretty much. It emphasizes practical caring. The idea being your faith isn't shown just by following rules, but by how you actually treat the people around you.
That really shifts things, doesn't it? From just like ticking boxes in a religious system to focusing on relationships, active compassion. The source actually calls it a wonderful rule for life.
And that's a deep insight, because this rule, love your neighbor as yourself, it provides a kind of universal standard. Even if you don't engage with the religious aspect, just the idea of treating others kindly, helping them. That's fundamental for any healthy community, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like an ethical safeguard against just ignoring people's needs. And notice that phrase, as you love yourself. It implies you need some self-awareness first. You need to understand your own value to know how to value others properly.
Huh. That adds another layer. It demands introspection before action. Okay, so a high standard, but clear and applicable to everyone. And then, how did he make sure people actually got this message, especially people who weren't, scholars or anything? Hashtag 1.2, teaching through simple stories, parables.
Well, that leads straight into his teaching method, which again was pretty revolutionary for its time because it was so inclusive. He didn't write complex essays, he told stories. Simple stories the source calls parables.
Parables, right, like short stories using everyday examples.
Exactly. Things people knew intimately. Farming, finding something valuable that was lost, managing money or servants, relatable situations.
So why use stories? What does the source highlight about that choice?
Accessibility. It stresses that the teachings were deliberately not difficult or complicated. They were meant for everyone. Children, adults, rich, poor, didn't matter.
That's quite different from how knowledge was often handled back then, right? Where knowing complex things gave you status.
Absolutely. This was like democratizing wisdom, making sure the core message wasn't locked away behind education or social standing. In a way, that very method was a statement against elitism.
It's almost the teaching equivalent of love your neighbor. If everyone matters, the message needs to reach everyone. Does the source give a specific example of a parable?
Yes, one of the most famous, the parable of the lost sheep.
Ah, yes, the shepherd with 100 sheep.
That's the one.
Yeah.
He has this big flock, 100 sheep. Pretty valuable. But one sheep wanders off. Just one.
Okay.
And the story says he leaves the 99, who are presumably safe for the moment, and goes searching high and low just for that one lost sheep.
Which, I mean, logically sounds a bit risky, doesn't it? Risk the whole flock for just one.
From a purely economic standpoint, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It seems inefficient, almost irrational.
Okay.
But that's the whole point. The source says the deeper message is that every single person is very important to God. And it emphasizes no one is forgotten.
Wow. So the individual has immense value, even if they're just one out of many, or maybe even if they've strayed.
Precisely. It flips the script from collective numbers to individual worth. The source calls this a very comforting thought.
And you can see why, especially for anyone feeling marginalized, overlooked, maybe told they didn't quite measure up according to the rules of the day.
It tells them they're not just a statistic. They are known, valued, and even pursued if they get lost. Using that simple image of a shepherd and a single sheep, it communicates a huge theological idea, the infinite value of the individual in a way anyone could grasp and remember.
So the teaching method itself reinforces the core message of inclusive love.
Okay, so we have the foundation, love, taught simply through stories. But the source makes a really strong point next. It wasn't just talk.
Right. He didn't just teach love, he lived it. He embodied it.
Exactly. The source says he showed it and was a great example. This is critical because it makes the teachings believable. It showed that loving your neighbor wasn't just some nice idea. It was something you could actually do. Hashtag 2.1, living the message.
So let's talk about how he showed it. The source mentions his inclusivity, how he helped all kinds of people. What did that look like in practice, given the social norms of the time?
Well, society then was very segmented. You had divisions based on wealth, health status, job, religious purity. Certain people were just considered outcasts.
People you weren't supposed to associate with?
Right. But the source highlights that he actively sought out these people. It says he was a friend to the poor and the sick. He deliberately interacted with those society often rejected.
So being seen with them, eating with them. That wasn't just being nice, it was a statement. It challenged those social barriers.
A huge statement. The source says he saw the good in every person, and it emphasizes his presence. He was very kind and very present.
What does very present mean here? Not just physically there, but...
Engaged, relational. He didn't just, issue decrees from afar. The source says he visited people, he ate with them. Sharing a meal was a massive sign of acceptance in that culture, and he listened to their problems.
That act of truly listening, being present with someone's troubles, that's a powerful form of love in itself, isn't it? It says, you matter.
It absolutely is. It's the practical application of love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
It shows that the core teaching wasn't abstract. It was about real connection, validating people's worth by giving them his time and attention.
Okay, so his actions mirrored his words perfectly. But then the source introduces something extraordinary. Hashtag tag 2.2 miraculous deeds and the source of power.
Right. Beyond the relational kindness, the source states he had a very special power from God.
A divine power. And crucially, how did he use it? Because power can obviously be used in many ways.
The source is really clear on this. It says he always used his power for good. It wasn't about demonstrating his own importance or gaining influence. The goal was purely to help, to make people's lives better, happy, and healthy.
So power as service, essentially.
Exactly. It was a direct response to the suffering he encountered.
And the source gives specific examples of this helping, these miracles.
Yes, it highlights two types of healing that are quite significant when you think about their social impact, too.
Okay.
First, helping people who could not see, allowing them to see again. And second, helping people who could not walk, enabling them to walk and even run.
And back then, without social safety nets, blindness or being unable to walk often meant, well, complete dependency, didn't it? Poverty, isolation.
It was often social death, yes.
Yeah.
You couldn't work. You were reliant on others, often excluded. So restoring sight wasn't just physical healing. It was restoring independence, the ability to participate in life again.
And restoring mobility meant freedom, dignity.
Precisely. So these miracles weren't just random acts of power. They were acts of complete restoration. Physical, social, probably spiritual too. They brought people back into the community.
And the source links this directly back to the main message, right?
It does. It explicitly says, love and help go together. It's presented as a natural consequence. If you love someone, you use whatever ability you have, in this case, this divine power to help them.
Makes sense. The actions demonstrate the principle.
And the source even draws a lesson for us today from this, calling it a very practical lesson. The idea that we should use our own resources, our own abilities, whatever they are, to help others, to lessen suffering.
So the power wasn't separate from the message. It was the ultimate expression of it.
Okay, so we've got this picture of teaching love, living love, using power for love. It sounds, well, overwhelmingly positive.
It does, but the source acknowledges that's not the whole story. It says there's a very sad part coming. The story takes a dark turn.
Yes, this message of radical love and inclusivity, it wasn't universally welcomed. The source says quite plainly, some people did not like his message.
They were threatened by it. It says they were afraid of his influence. Hashtag 3.1, the conflict and fear of change.
Which leads to the obvious question, why fear a message of love and helping people? What was so threatening?
The source pinpoints it. It says he represented a big change. And the specific reason for the fear, because he said that love was more important than rules.
Oh. And that is the direct challenge to any established system based on, well, rules and regulation.
Right. If love is the ultimate principle, then all the detailed laws, the purity codes, the things that determine who's in and who's out, they suddenly become less important, maybe even irrelevant.
Exactly. It shifts the basis of authority. If the highest virtue is loving people, something anyone can do, then the power held by those who interpret and enforce complex rules is diminished. It kind of levels the playing field, doesn't it?
It really does. It democratizes spiritual value in a
Yeah.
way. So this wasn't just about being kinder, it was a fundamental challenge to the power structures of the time.
And that perceived threat, according to the source, led directly to the consequences. These people who were afraid of losing control or influence, they had him arrested.
And it didn't stop there. The source is very direct about the outcome. He died on a cross.
Mm-hmm. A method of execution reserved for rebels and the lowest criminals, causing immense grief and confusion among his friends, his followers.
Yeah, you can imagine, from their perspective, watching this unfold, it must have looked like a complete disaster. A terrible ending, as the source puts it. Love and good works seemingly crushed by fear and power.
It certainly looked like defeat, like the rules won. But this is where the narrative takes perhaps its most significant turn, the interpretation of this death. Hashtag tag tag 3.2 the sacrifice.
Right. The source introduces a completely different way of understanding this event. It wasn't just a tragic end, it was something purposeful, a sacrifice, even a gift of love.
This reframing is absolutely central. For those who follow this story, the death isn't seen as failure, but as the point. The source explains it very simply, avoiding complex jargon. It says he took all the bad things, all the mistakes, all the sadness of the world on himself.
Okay, that's a huge concept. Taking on the world's negativity, its errors, its pain. Why? What was the purpose of doing that, according to the source?
It was done for everyone. The goal was redemption, so that people could be forgiven for their own mistakes, their own bad things, so they could have a new start, a new life with God.
Forgiveness, a new start. That's incredibly powerful, isn't it? It speaks to that universal feeling of having messed up, of wishing you could undo things.
Absolutely. So, in this view, the cross isn't about God demanding suffering. It's presented as the ultimate act of love, taking the consequences himself, specifically to make reconciliation possible, to open a way back.
So that terrible ending is actually framed as the necessary step to achieve this universal forgiveness and renewal.
Exactly. The source presented as the ultimate act of kindness, the mechanism through which people can be freed from their past and enter into that close relationship with God that his teachings were all about. It turns the tragedy into a profound gift.
But even with that reframing of the death as a sacrifice, if the story ended there, it might still feel incomplete, right? Noble, maybe, but still ending in death.
That's a crucial point. The source is emphatic. The sad part, the death, is not the end of the story. What happens next is presented as the absolute linchpin of the whole thing.
The event that changes the meaning of everything that came before it?
Precisely. The source says, after 3 days, something amazing happened. He came back to life. The resurrection.
And the source calls this the biggest miracle of all.
Yeah.
Hashtag tag 4.1, the greatest miracle.
It has to be, doesn't it? Because it fundamentally validates everything. If he remains dead, he's a martyr, perhaps a great teacher who died for his cause. But if he comes back to life,
Then the sacrifice wasn't just a symbolic act, it was part of something much bigger. It suggests the power he demonstrated earlier wasn't temporary, but inherent.
yes, the source says that by returning to life, he defeated death. This is the ultimate claim. The final enemy, the thing everyone fears, has been overcome.
And that victory demonstrates, according to the source, that his love, the love he preached and embodied, is ultimately more powerful than anything, more powerful than death.
That's the core assertion. It elevates the entire message from a moral philosophy to a cosmic reality.
Now, how does the source handle the believability of this? It's an extraordinary claim. Does it offer any evidence within the narrative?
It does. and it focuses on tangible relational proof. It's not described as some vague spiritual reappearance. The source says his friends saw him, they talked with him, they even ate with him.
Okay, so very physical, very real interactions, providing concrete reassurance to those first followers that this wasn't just grief-stricken imagination.
Exactly. It anchors the biggest miracle in verifiable shared experience, at least within the narrative itself. It gave them the foundation to believe and to carry the message forward.
And this victory over death, validated by these appearances, this becomes the source of everything that follows, the driving force.
It becomes the engine of hope.
Yeah.
Capital H, hashtag tag 4.2, the resulting hope.
Hope. Okay, that makes sense. If death isn't final, if love is stronger, then hope becomes possible. How does the source break down what this hope actually means for people?
It outlines it quite clearly, almost like 3 pillars supporting this new reality.
Okay, pillar 1.
First, the hope of forgiveness. Because he came back, it proves the sacrifice worked. The burden he took is dealt with, so people can be forgiven.
Meaning they aren't trapped by their past mistakes. They can genuinely move forward.
Yes, it offers that immediate release, that new start we talked about, a psychological and spiritual reset.
Okay, that's pillar 1, forgiveness. What's the second?
Second is the hope of relationship. The source contrasts this with maybe older ideas of God being distant or intimidating. Because of the sacrifice and resurrection, the separation is bridged.
So people can actually connect with God directly.
Yes, the source uses very simple, warm language. It says people can have a relationship with God, moving from being separated to being friends with God.
Friends with God. That emphasizes intimacy, closeness. It brings the divine right into personal experience.
Exactly. It fulfills that core teaching of love being relational.
And the third pillar, this one looks further ahead, doesn't it?
It does. It's the ultimate promise, the hope of eternal life. This addresses the fundamental human reality of mortality.
Life after death.
Yes, life after death with God. And the source describes this future existence in very appealing terms. A place with no more sadness, no more pain, only pure joy and peace.
Wow. So it's not just about fixing the past forgiveness or changing the present relationship, but guaranteeing a perfect future.
It provides that complete package. Hope for now, hope for eternity. It offers a profound sense of security and meaning in the face of life's difficulties and ultimately death itself.
Forgiveness, relationship, eternal life. That's a comprehensive structure of hope built entirely on the resurrection. Hashtag 4.3, the identity of the teacher.
Now, to really grasp why these claims are made, the power, the sacrifice, the resurrection, the resulting hope we have, to touch on how the source identifies this central figure.
Right, because the source makes it clear, doesn't it? For Christians, he's not just seen as a good person or a wise teacher.
No, much more, as the source says. His identity is the key that unlocks the whole story's logic, according to this perspective.
And that core belief is
that he is the Son of God. This specific identity is presented as the explanation for everything extraordinary. The miracles, the authority to forgive, the power over death itself.
Okay, so if he is the Son of God, what does the source say was his ultimate mission? Why come to Earth in the first place?
The source gives a really concise 2-part answer that sums up almost everything we've discussed.
Okay.
First, he came to show us who God is, and specifically to show that God is love. His entire life, his teachings, his actions, his kindness, they were all a living demonstration of God's character.
A revelation of God's nature through a human life. And the second part?
Second, he came to save us.
Save us. What does save mean in this context?
The source explains it simply. To rescue us, to give us a way back to God. It connects back to the idea of separation caused by those bad things, the mistakes. The mission was to bridge that gap.
So reveal God's loving nature and provide the way through his sacrifice and resurrection for people to reconnect with that loving God.
Exactly. That's the saving mission described in the source. It ties the whole narrative together.
So we've traced this incredible story arc from the simple command to love all the way to these huge cosmic claims about defeating death and offering eternal life. But the source insists this isn't just ancient history.
No, it's presented as something current, something alive. The source says this story gives us strength and joy today.
How does it remain relevant now? How does it provide that ongoing strength? Hashtag tag 5.1, a living hope.
It comes back to that idea of relationship. The hope isn't just a future promise. It's described as a living hope, meaning it's active, it's present now.
Okay, a living hope. How does that work in practice for someone who believes this story?
The source emphasizes the personal relationship aspect. This is really central. It means the connection isn't just through institutions or rituals, but direct and personal.
Like talking to him.
Yes. The source encourages believers to pray, to talk to him, and significantly, to feel his presence in our lives.
So it's an ongoing interaction, a sense of companionship.
That's the idea. It brings the hope of relationship right into daily life. When facing challenges, sadness, uncertainty, the belief is that you're not alone, that you can connect with this figure who embodies love and power.
That would certainly be a source of strength and comfort, wouldn't it? Knowing you have that access, that presence.
It anchors the grand theological claims in immediate personal experience. The Jesus who helped and listened in the stories is presented as being available to help and listen now. That's the essence of the living hope. Hashtag 5.2, the promise of return.
Okay, so there's a present reality, but the story still isn't finished, is it? The source looks even further ahead.
That's right. It confirms the story's not over yet. There's a final act still to come.
Another future hope.
Yes, the belief, the expectation that one day he will come back to earth. This is often called the second coming.
And what happens then? What's the purpose of this return, according to the source?
It's presented as the ultimate resolution, the final victory of the love and goodness he represents. The source says he will make everything new.
Make everything new, like fix the brokenness in the world.
Exactly. Reverse the effects of all the conflict, the suffering, the bad things. It says he will end all the suffering in the world.
That's huge. The ultimate answer to all the pain and injustice we see.
It's the final fulfillment of the promise. It ties back to that initial conflict where love seemed defeated by rules and fear. This return ensures love gets the last word, definitively and universally.
So the outcome is?
A new time of peace and happiness for everyone. This is framed as the ultimate hope. It provides assurance not just for personal salvation, but for the restoration of the entire world. A perfect future with God without any shadow of sadness or pain.
So it secures hope on every level.
Mm.
Personal forgiveness now, relationship now, and a guaranteed perfect world in the future. Hashtag the Truck Show.
So if we just pull back and look at the whole picture from this source, it starts with a core message, deceptively simple. Love God, love your neighbor. That message is then lived out through radical kindness, presence, even miracles used only for helping. Then comes the clash with fear, leading to a death that's reframed as a willing sacrifice, a gift to deal with all the world's wrongs.
Right, the turning point.
Which is then validated by the biggest miracle, the resurrection, proving love is stronger than death itself.
And that unleashes hope.
Exactly. Hope for forgiveness, hope for a personal relationship with God, hope for eternal life, and ultimately, hope for a restored world when he returns. It's quite a narrative arc.
It really is. From practical kindness all the way to cosmic destiny.
Right.
And the source concludes by framing the whole thing.
Mhm.
How did it put it?
It suggests the entire story, this whole message, is meant to be like a love letter from God to everyone.
A love letter. That really changes the perspective from rules and obligations to an invitation, doesn't it?
It does indeed.
So maybe this is the thought to leave you, our listener, with today. If this story, at its heart, is presented as an invitation, a love letter, and if the foundation is that practical command to love your neighbor, what's one small, maybe even slightly radical act of kindness or presence you could offer today?
Mm.
Could be helping out a colleague, really listening to a friend without distraction, maybe just a genuine smile for a stranger. Something that shows in your own small way that maybe that claim from the source that love is more important than rules actually has power in the here and now.
A practical response to the letter.
Exactly. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.